next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
Yep, I am smiling again. Why? Because I know what we're all going to get to experience right now in this show coming up, you guys. I hope you have your coffee, your drinks, your wine, your sangrias, your popcorn. This is going to be a great show. And I'm excited because I can promise you this, the vast majority of you, the content that's in this show, you're not going to be like, man, that was really interesting. The vast majority are going to be so moved by it. You're going to go and you're going to go down this rabbit hole and this journey with us. And you're all just going to start looking into it because it's so impactful. What am I talking about? I'm talking about cell memory. What does that mean? Well, you're going to find out here pretty soon. Welcome to the Alpha Warrior Show. I am your host, Alpha. Another great guest that I have coming on, TAJANA, or maybe the nickname TJ. I'll let you guys figure that one out on your own. But I saw, I follow her on X, formerly Twitter, and I saw something she put out there, and I was just like, man, this is really interesting. It was a video. So then I started looking into this, and I was just like, wow. So I will just say this. Is the heart just the heart? Does the heart have other energies? You know, is there a soul that stays? The memories of soul? You're going to find out. We'll share some thoughts at the end of this. But before we do that, I'm going to change things a little bit. I know right now you usually get 2 more commercial ads. We're just going to do 1 ad. And then after that, as soon as the ad's done, there's going to be a video that plays that kind of sets us up for this conversation. So get ready, guys. Enjoy. But first we do, let's pay the rent, keep the lights on, and let's join Lindell.
My Towels solved the problem that we've all had with towels. You go into the stores and they feel lotiony and soft, but then you get them home and they wind dry you. That's why I made My Towels. They actually work, they're soft, and they absorb. And now I'm excited to announce 2 brand new lines of My Towels. What makes them the best towels ever is they're now made with 100% long staple Shapir cotton. This is a combed ring spun cotton that makes My Towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory sale price as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get My Towels for only $29.98. Or you can get my designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save 50% now on all My Towels. They actually work. What a concept. This offer won't last long, so please order now.
mypillow.com.
Atlanta, Georgia, December 1992. 17-year-old Amy Tippins is having difficulty breathing. Suspecting that she has some form of pneumonia, she makes an appointment with her family doctor. But the actual diagnosis she receives is, in a word, shocking.
My senior year of high school, I started developing what I thought was pneumonia. And then when they went in and do some further testing, they realized I didn't have a pneumonia. It was actually a tumor pushing on my diaphragm and making it much harder for me to breathe. And I was in full liver failure. They said she needs to have a transplant or she'll hemorrhage to death.
With time running out, Amy received her new liver and survived. But in the months following her transplant, she found herself exhibiting interests and abilities that were not only new to her, but also surprising.
Not long after surgery, some things about myself and some of my traits had changed. Within a couple of years of my transplant, I really started to love projects like replacing flooring on my own. I never saw flooring being put in. I never saw anything like that being done. What I discovered is it was actually fun to work with my hands. Just kind of go, that's interesting.
Of course, it isn't surprising that people who have had life-saving transplant operations often report experiencing a new outlook on life. But new interests? New personality traits? Is it possible that Amy Tippins was getting these from somewhere else?
I knew my donor was a male. I knew he was 47 and that he had been killed in a car wreck in Columbus, Georgia. So I went to the library and I started looking up obituaries for that time. And I kind of backed into his obituary and backed into figuring out who he was. What I discovered is he was a police officer. He was 47 and his name was Mike. His sister told me that he did a lot of his own home renovation. He also liked to work with his hands. He liked to do projects. When I found out who my donor was, it made a lot more sense on why some things about myself and some of my traits had changed after transplant.
Can transplanted organs really contain some part of the donor's identity? Conventional medicine believes the notion is far-fetched. So how do you explain what we just...
How do you explain what we just saw? Let me bring on our guest, because that is going to be what we were talking about today. TAJANA, you saw that intro video. You didn't know what I was going to play. So what are your thoughts on seeing that? And then I'm going to tell you something that's going to be like, what, when I saw it. But what are your thoughts on that?
It's crazy to kind of hear about these theories, and also super interesting because after I did my video on the exact same thing where it was blood transfusion and organ transplants that actually change a person's personality, I had so many first-hand encounters. And even I had a girl text me and basically tell me how she felt the change coming on very slowly, and she knew it wasn't herself, but she felt like it was part of herself. So then seeing this lady say the exact same thing, where she said after a few years, you know, you start getting these urges and you don't know where they're coming from. And her urge was to basically, you know, pull carpeting and be a carpenter. The girl who messaged me said the exact same thing after her organ transplant. And I find it fascinating that even in the Bible, it says that God says that your life is in the blood, and that he made the flesh as kind of like a vessel for your soul. So that we have so much more that science has not discovered, or even looked down the road of discovering what is happening, just because it seems so far-fetched and out there.
It does. Now, you know, there's going to be some people that are like, Alpha, TAJANA, you're taking us into the world of woo-woo.
Yeah.
Strap on your seatbelt, because we're going to touch on some woo-woo, because I'm going to tell you, this conversation is just going to open up the path and door for so many more conversations, because here's what's trippy. Now, when I saw this video, I saw the title. I was like, okay, this is kind of reference what we're talking about. Let me see if this is a video I want to use in the show we put together. And as this woman comes on and she starts to talk, now, granted, I know it's going to be about cell memory, but I don't know what she's going to say as far as what those memories are like and what she feels. And when I'm looking at her, you know, I shared with you a little bit before the show, and the audience knows, you know, I was a cop, you know, I worked gangs and detectives for, you know, almost a decade and a half. And so, you know, when you meet cops, you know each other without ever even, you know, you bump at each other at Walmart and you're like, he's a cop, she's a cop. Well, when I'm listening to this lady talk, I'm like, man, she has like that presence, you know, like a cop, you know, like, now this is not even this is just watching a video. But I say all that to say this. I think there's an energy and a frequency that just, when we start to soften our hearts and our minds to this stuff, that you open up the acceptance of these things that normally we've just been programmed since little kids to shut down. And I'm telling you this, I'm so happy that I found you, and you have so much other content just beyond this. I want everybody to know that. Links to follow TAJANA are down in the description, because you guys are going to want more of her, I promise. But
Thank
it's
you.
just one of those things where, how much has, you know, literature and books and schooling, even secondary education, our government, you know, they know about these things. I mean, there's a whole other show we could do on MK Ultra and all these other things. They know. And why do we, you know, when our little kids have these imaginations, you know, what are we really shutting down? So my first question to you, TAJANA, is how in the world did you even get involved in looking into this?
Well, I kind of go into rabbit holes by accident sometimes. I absolutely find the woo-woo stuff fascinating because in my head, I'm like, there's got to be more to life than just what we see and what we feel. And there have been so many examples of scientific experiments that have been done that have been just brushed off because they seem so woo-woo, but there's actually a substantial amount of evidence to show that there is something real there. And so I go down these rabbit holes just to see how the world functions. Why are we here? What is the purpose of all of us here? Because it can't just be 9 to 5 work and then you retire and then that's it, right? Because I mean, that just seems like an entire waste of the creation that is on this earth. I mean, the intricacy of the geometrics and math and just all the shapes that are in us in cells and how they work. Everything is so intricate that I kind of refuse to believe that our only purpose on life here is a 9 to 5 job. And then, you just pretty much pass away in old age and you have like a little bit of exploring when you're retired. And so I refuse to believe that. And I've just gone down one rabbit hole after another. And then I love all the mind stuff that the MK Ultra and CIA experiments do. So like that absolutely fascinates me. And I want to know what they know so bad. And so one thing kind of led to another. I've read on MK Ultra, like the Delta experiments, that they use certain blood types because blood types can carry, I guess, certain powers that family lineages have learned, such as seeing into the future, oracles, just powers that can't really be described by today's standards. And
Oh,
so
you're coming back for another show.
yeah, so I find it absolutely fascinating that our government's looking into this. You know what I mean? So if the government is looking into this and keeping it secret, I'm like, there's got to be something cool in there that we should know, or that would be cool to know in general, just to unlock the secrets of the earth or the matrix or whatever we're in here.
It's so true. So the first question I had, and I'll share this, with the audience, that this is new to, is when I heard of using cell memory or understanding cell memory, and then I just started thinking, well, what are memories? Like if I say what are memories, you're like, oh yeah, you remember your birthday, you remember this, but what deeper than that? Like, let's pull back another layer. What's the actual makeup of a memory? Like, there's just not all these projectors going off in our brain. Our brain's not built that way. It's it's fat and muscle and electrons and all this in blood and oxygen. Like, I've been to autopsies. Like, I actually physically seen some brains, right? And I didn't see no movie screens or LCD screens and those things. But yet, when we have a memory, you can visually see something, if you're trying to remember it that way, or you can auditorily hear something if you try to remember that way. I mean, you can like I'll make it easy for everybody. Morgan Freeman. Now everybody in their head can just literally hear Morgan Freeman's voice, right?
Yeah.
So where is it stored? Like, how does that look? So I was like, so before I even get into cell memory, like, what's a memory? So I usually don't do a lot of video clips, but this is just so intense for me that I found this clip. And it says what memories are made of. Now, it's very technical. I'm a Marine, you guys. I chew crayons. So, I'm going to have to watch this a few times over. But it was interesting because I understood it enough to get the science of a memory. And I want to play it so I can get your thoughts on it. And then we'll go from there. So let me put this on the screen and let me hit play. So, and all the links to this stuff will be down in the description if you guys want to watch them later.
The capacity of the brain to learn new information and remember experiences is essential to our existence. Our memory connects our past to the present and prepares us for the future. It helps animals and humans to adapt to the environment. Almost everything we do relies on it, finding food and knowing how to get it, or remembering how to get home. The question is, how does the brain store new information? Let's take a look inside. The Canadian psychologist, Donald Hebb, suggested that learning and memory occurs when two connected neurons are activated at the same time or close in time, leading to strengthening of the connection between them. This is often paraphrased as neurons that fire together, wire together. A neuron sends an action potential along its axon, causing it to release a neurotransmitter, which the other neuron receives at the synapse, the connection between them. Let's do an experiment where we look at changes in synaptic strength called long-term potentiation, or LTP. Here we study this in a rodent brain, but it has been observed in several different species. We prepare brain slices, and the cells in the brain tissue can be kept alive in oxygenated artificial brain fluid for several hours. We pick up a brain slice and place the tissue under a microscope. We look for an area called the hippocampus, which is known to be important for memory. For our experiment, we place an electrode onto the slice to stimulate axons that are connected to a neuron that we will record from. This technique is called patch clamp. First, we position the stimulation electrode. Then we increase the magnification on the microscope so that we can see the cell bodies of individual neurons. We place the patch pipette on the slice. Tiny movements are controlled with the micro manipulator. We now establish a connection between the patch pipette and the membrane of the neuron at the cell body. We open the cell, and we can now monitor and control its electrical activity. But before we start our experiment, let's take a look inside the screen. This is a 3D reconstruction of the neuron. While the patch pipette is located on the cell body, we will be recording signals that the neuron receives far out at its synapses. Now let's start our experiment. We have placed the stimulation electrode on axons and connected it to the stimulation box. The patch pipette is connected to an amplifier, and we can now monitor the activity of the cell. We apply current and induce an action potential. On the postsynaptic cell, we record the synaptic response, called excitatory postsynaptic potential, or EPSP. Ion channels and receptors transmit the signals. The amount and location of receptors in the synapse is dynamically regulated and determines the strength of the connection. When a neuron fires an action potential, glutamate is released and opens receptors to let ions flow in. This induces the synaptic potential that we record. To induce LTP, we will use spike timing dependent plasticity. We induce an action potential in the presynaptic neuron, and immediately after, we induce an action potential in the connected neuron. This protocol is based on Hebbian's postulate. So what does the coincident activation of two neurons actually do? One important mechanism for LTP is the presence of a coincidence detector in the synapse, the NMDA receptor. It is normally blocked by magnesium. However, when the neuron becomes activated, this block is briefly removed. If in this very moment, the presynaptic neuron fires an action potential, the receptor opens and allows ions to flow in. This induces downstream signals that lead to the incorporation of more AMPA receptors in the synapse, which increases the synaptic strength. We now resume the same stimulation as before the LTP induction. And the magic has happened. The synaptic response has become larger. Synaptic changes are likely determining which cells are activated together and belong to a neuronal ensemble. So maybe this is why the cat knows that there is food in the blue ball.
So I know
That's
very
so
technical.
cool.
I know very technical, but I share that for myself, for you, Tajana, and the audience to understand that there's an actual science behind this, like a biological science that's here. Why would we think that this just stops at the brain? Why wouldn't this transfer to the heart or your lungs or your liver or your kidneys? Because what's in blood? Cells. And then when you look inside the cells, it's like I said, I know it's technical. And you guys trust me. Alpha was just like, huh? Right?
Oh.
I went full primitive caveman on that, but I understood enough to say, hey, they tested it, they saw that it worked, and they saw when we say, Morgan Freeman's voice and we all hear it, Well, what that video is what our brain just did and why we can hear Morgan Freeman's voice. So I do that to kind of soften everybody's no way on this woo-woo to be like, yes, there probably is a way. So Tiana, I don't know if the video made any sense to you. I'm curious on your thoughts. So curious on your thoughts on the video. And then as we get into the cell memory, moms, and I'll start with a sad story here. One of the first times that I had to do a death notification, and I shared this story in roll call, so the details of it are, somewhere else. I'll link in the description. You guys want to see it. But ultimately, I went to this, it was an assistance for another agency. It was here in California. And this young man had died in a car accident. And we had to, notify the next of kin, which was the mom. It was too far of a drive for them to send somebody. So anyways, I do this notification, and the mom and dad answer the door. They're in tears when I tell them everything. And I mean, there's no real training on how to handle that. So I'm like, I'm just going to be here and be present, and, when they they're, is there other family you can call and stuff like that? They were a little bit older. So there was a neighbor that they were going to have come over. But while we were waiting, the mom tells me, she goes, earlier tonight, I knew something happened to my son. And I guess she kind of saw the look in my eye, like maybe a little bit of doubt. And so she tells me, she goes, no, I knew something happened. She goes, look, I even tried to call him, and she shows me her phone. Or she tried to call him, and he goes, and he didn't answer. It made me more worried. You can see that she tried to call him. I think it was like 2 or 3 times. Now, cell memory is what you're going to get into, but it just makes me wonder, that kid's from his mom. There's a blood connection there. Is there more to frequencies and energy and these connections to people, remote viewing and stuff like that? I mean, I just want to be a sponge now and just listen to you, Tiana, your thoughts on the video, and then on the story I just shared with you.
So the video there, the synapses and all of that, I have a degree in molecular biology and biochemistry. So
Get out of here.
I'm not even kidding. Like I've got a master's in computer science, and everybody wonders why I went off into blue collar, but blue collar is like not fake. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to be fake at all in blue collar. Like how people feel is how they tell you they feel. And there's like no hiding it. There's no like pretend niceness for HR. Like you get a name labeled on you, like they'll call you a dummy right to your face, but at least they're being honest, right? So like, yeah. But with the synapses, basically what they're trying to tell you there is the chemical reactions that happen within our neurons and how our brain actually communicates with the rest of the body. But then when I took my computer science course, like my master's in computer science, I realized that the synapses and how our brain and everything I guess communicates, it's exactly the same way we communicate with certain codes that we write. So you're basically telling a computer how to think, and you're telling it to go from one command to the next command, and it's all in math, and all of that math kind of happens in your brain in a chemical way, but it's exactly the same like process. And then I think it was in 2018, scientists realized that you can actually put memories, like a memory stick, into people's DNAs. And that your own DNA can store so much memory and so much like energy that it's insane. Like you would only need one cell. Yeah. You would only need like one cell or one strand of somebody's entire DNA code to be able to pretty much store all of the world's information into.
So you're, first of all, I'm just super impressed that you're like, yeah, I got a master's. So you totally recognize that I went full on Marine on that video. Like,
oh no, you did really good. I just thought it was hilarious because you said crayon eating, and that's literally what we call a guy on site. We call him a crayon eating window licker. So I was like, yes, I totally get that humor.
I love the window licker one. Like that's an all-time favorite. But I mean, so when Elon talks about, because I'll admit I've been a little bit, I was like, are they, or is this a gimmick to bring in funding? For those that don't know, he did some neurological plant into this guy's brain, and he's able to manipulate the mouse on the computer screen with that. And essentially what you're saying is, no, that really is possible to do that, because you can plug in That is just crazy
Yeah,
to
yeah.
me.
So that's where the cell memory comes from. It's actually the DNA in all of in like all of our cells. And so when somebody gets a transplant, it's not just in the blood, but it's also the cell memory in their organs and their own DNA. So what you have is you're taking DNA or memory from someone's body and putting it in someone else's, and then we're watching real like time kind of mushing of their personality and the organ donor's personality. And I apologize for the sun. I
No,
didn't
you're
realize it
good.
was going to be sunny today. That's usually not the case in Canada. So I'm like,
No, you're good. If you guys getting sun in Canada, be happy and enjoy that. Get that.
yep,
It's energy, right? It's
that is very
symbolism.
true.
Shining light on truth. That's the way I see this. So, I mean, it's just wow. I'm just so many wows. What is from a more simplistic understanding? So, what is cell memory?
So cell memory is basically your DNA. So our DNA, they have said that, I apologize, and my dogs too. Like they just, that's why I tried to mute myself. It's because they're crying by the door. So basically, cell memory is memory in our DNA because only 2% of our DNA codes everything that we need for life right now. 98% has been kind of deemed as junk DNA because we have absolutely no idea what it does. It doesn't produce any proteins. It doesn't help with any kind of growth. And so they've just labeled it junk DNA. And then computer science came along with molecular biology, and they realized that you can actually store information, pictures, everything that you store in a computer, you can actually store it in the DNA. So our code in our DNA almost seems to mimic codes in computer science. And a lot of people have said that they have found the zeros and the ones, the computer code in almost the entire universe, which is where string theory and kind of quantum, I guess, physics comes from. And so that we are actually just carrying all of our ancestors' memories in our bodies via the DNA. So if we did have one source where we all came from and then kind of divided, that means we all have the memory capability of tapping into everything that our ancestors and ancient knowledge knew before we came along.
Freaking A. So what you're telling me is that tree in Avatar, like
It might be real. Like it might have been a little bit of a hint of what's actually real in the so-called matrix or whatever theater that we're kind of experiencing right now. And even with blood transfusions, because blood will circulate itself every 30 days, they've noticed that even after the 30-day circulation of them getting a blood transfusion, they will still keep the other person's personality. But with blood transfusion, it's usually taste buds. So they'll get a blood transfusion. They'll start eating cake when they've never liked cake, or like they'll eat chicken burgers when they've never liked chicken burgers before. One lady was a vegetarian and then was just craving meat after her blood transfusion.
This is wild. I'll tell you what. When I was reading some of the stories and studying this stuff to prepare for the show, there's a lot of heart moving stories. You
Yes.
know, the bonding, between the donor family and the recipients. And I was like, man, it's so moving. Because here's the thing, I'm so skeptical, and I ain't trusting the government, right? I ain't putting that donor on my driver's license, and then all of a sudden, some elite, needs exactly what my match is, and all of a sudden my brakes don't work on my truck. I'm like, I've seen enough damn movies.
Yeah.
But at the same time, hearing some of these stories, where people have, an unexpected death or a situation where there can be a donor, I was like, you know what? I could do a legal document that I put in the hands of someone I really, really trust, a wife, a mom, a brother, that if it comes to that, they can come forward and say, hey, here's since we know that he's going to die, we're at that point, we actually do want to say he's a donor, because then it's my family in control of it and not a crazy tyrannical government, right?
Exactly. I've thought of that too, because on one hand I'm like, okay, well, if I pass away, I don't really need my organs. But then I was like, maybe what if they find out my blood type? Like, and next thing you know, my brakes don't work, and or I get into an accident at work where like something just falls on me, like a car, something that's like really obvious wasn't an accident,
No, it's so true. As a matter of fact, I was watching a movie about a week or two ago, and it's I want to say, I'm not sure if it was on Amazon or Netflix, because there is a lot of like revelations and symbolism in movies. And essentially what this movie was about is, it's kind of like reincarnation, but it's like the second they die, they're reincarnated, but they go to this central location where, these people find them. I guess there's like flags you can look for to find like who these people are, because it wasn't like everybody does it. It was only like a select few of people that do it. And they take them to like this hub headquarters, and they put them through this training, which brings all those memories, and like essentially like cell memory, brings all these cell memories things to life, different weaponized training and all this stuff that makes them like these super like badass people. But then there's a dark side of this, situation. But I say that movie to say this is, if there's all these I'm a firm believer that, even books of fiction and movies of fiction are, they were all rooted in some truth at some moment, and then it gets exaggerated through Hollywood. But what is that root truth? And I'm starting to think about it, and it just makes me feel like, sound memory just has to be real. Like, how have you convinced yourself or proven through yourself through research and training that this is actually legitimate? Like, this is not just woo woo, like this is real.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you have a lot of people that give you firsthand stories of their experience. You can't really brush that off, especially if it happens to like 80% of recipients from organ donors. That is a huge number. That is very significant. And I don't think we can say that everything is woo-woo just because science can't explain it right now. Maybe we haven't reached the point of science where we can actually explain this in a simplistic way that would make sense. And so I find it really weird that people will take, this woo-woo information when there's actual substantial evidence and proof and personal experience that it is real. And so now that we're getting to the science, like we're seeing that DNA can hold storage, and it can actually be used as a computer device almost, to hold memories, to hold storage, to hold information. Then you have reincarnation stories, such as like the Edie story in Egypt, where the little girl fell down the stairs. They thought she died, and she came back and knew everything about ancient Egypt. Absolutely everything. Yeah, I did a story on her as a reincarnation thing, and that was the coolest thing ever, because she has been on the BBC. She's worked with scientists, archaeologists, actually helped uncover a lot of things in ancient Egypt in the 80s. And basically, she said that she woke up and she remembered everything from her past life. And so now you have these instances as well, where people have had near-death experiences, or they remember things from their past, especially as children, because children are still very sensitive to the whole, I guess, when you have a feeling inside and you can't really explain it, but it's like that gut feeling and it tells you something. Well, children have that heightened 10 times. And then we have that taken away by the school system and the matrix, where you have to think a certain way and you're not allowed to be very creative in your thoughts, and you're not allowed to explore. You have to stay in line. And I think that's why they do it, because if we all were to really get in touch with our creative side, I think we could actually unlock our DNA and be able to read it as if we were to open up our computers or cell phones and kind of go into our files and just click and read what we have saved. And I think that there's an ability to do that with DNA. We just haven't reached it yet. Or maybe the government knows and they're just keeping it from us, because that would be kind of cool if they knew.
You're giving me goosebumps. I'm getting the chills and goosebumps, because as you're talking, and it seems to be happening so much lately with a lot of my guests, where they bring this information and you're talking about topics that are unrelated, but all of a sudden there's a connection between them, because the mechanism of how these things works explains the ladder of something. And as I was listening to you talk about this, I started getting goosebumps, because then I was like, the power of manifestation. If there's this connection to all of us, is that what we're doing? Through our cell memory, is our cell memory has a connection to that through some type of, I don't know how to say all the scientific stuff. You know what I mean? I just say the stuff, and then, and then people can use their brains to figure it out. But it just makes me feel like, when people, they say, think positive, like you get bad news or health news, think positive to manifest that, because we do know that when you do think negative, and I know there's science behind this where they've measured it. You think negative, you do affect your health and your breathing and all that stuff. I mean, it just seems hardwired in us. Like those little tiny little cells have all this stuff. I want to bring up on the screen because I know there's always still people that are going to be doubters. So this is one that's going to influence the moms, right? You can't argue mother's love. A mother's love is a mother's love, for the moms that are out there. So I'll just read this real quick. At 50 years old, she got the gift she had prayed for her entire life, a new heart. But shortly after her transplant, something changed, something she couldn't easily explain. I know I love my family, but I don't get that squishy feeling anymore. Perhaps most importantly, Switzer says her feelings of love are no longer the same. I don't know when the first time I realized it, said Switzer, who is from Brampton, Ontario. I know I love my family, but I don't get the same squishy feeling anymore. And I'll link that article if anybody wants to read the whole story. Now, here's the thing. A mother's love, like it's just a mom's love. Something like that just doesn't disappear. But she gets a
Exactly.
heart transplant and she's like, well, and when you go on and read in the article, she says that the love was there, but what she means by that squishy feeling is no longer there. To her, the love for her husband and the kids was now more of a logical thing. Like it makes sense. Like this is my kids, this is my husband. I love them, but that wasn't there. You've had people reach out to you. Are there stories that are like this?
Yeah, one of the girls said she started to feel very differently about her family, and her family started to feel differently about her. So, like, nothing was changing, but she started to feel very different about her family and about the way she was viewing life. And her family noticed a change in her and would tell her that there was a change in her, but she didn't really know what to say or do. And she said it was a really weird feeling, and it still kind of persists and hangs around her all these years. And apparently her transplant was in 2013. So it's been almost 10 years. And she said slowly she felt like a creeping feeling, like she wasn't herself anymore or fully herself, and that she had something kind of take over her. And so her entire personality went from bubbly to more calm and more of I guess, a different demeanor. I think she took on the personality of her donor a little bit too much, because I think it was her liver that she had transplanted, or was it a kidney? I'm not sure, one or the other. I can't remember, because I had like 200 messages of stories of people sharing their experiences and how it changed them and how slowly they felt the change. With blood transfusion, it was just basically taste buds. But with organ transplant, it was anything from physical changes, such as like curly hair, or just physical changes in the sense of mannerisms of how they talked, how they moved their arms and hands when they spoke, how they walked was another one. Like their walk actually changed. Somebody said they didn't notice it, but other people, how like everyone has a walk, like,
Yeah.
and you can kind of tell from behind, you're like, oh, that's that person by how they walk. Yeah, well, apparently she didn't realize it, but her walk had completely changed, and her husband noticed it.
That is just I
Yeah.
didn't realize so many people reached out to you. What from your research and from the stories that are being shared with you, what seems to be like the most, like what are the commonalities between all this stuff? And then if you had to pick which organ seems to have the most dramatic effect, what would that be?
The heart definitely has the most dramatic effect. All of the blood transfusion was mainly, people have noticed taste bud changes. So foods and particular drinks, that was the only thing with blood transfusion that would change. With heart transplants, that was the biggest change. And then the second one, I believe, was the liver, that would change people's personalities the most. And then everything else, people weren't really detailed with what organ transplant they received, but they did just tell me that they did receive a transplant, but not which organ and what happened. It was just about the changes and how they felt that they were changing as well, but they couldn't put their finger on what was happening to them.
I would love to see more like scientific research go into this with like large group studies, because if like I'd be curious, is there an organ in transplants that has more physical characteristics, like you're saying, the hair or the walk, and the heart being something that's more of an emotional thing or desire, because then it opens the door for another study. since these organs have those kind of manifestations when they're transplanted into somebody else, then is there some type of control mechanism that's in us that we need to understand better? That, if all of a sudden we're having, mobility issues or issues with the hair, is there an organ that we can focus on that maybe there's a deficiency there or an injury there that, healing of that organ all of a sudden maybe heals other things we notice? Or maybe people that are dealing with, women that suffer from postpartum depression or something. Is there maybe some underlying heart issue that's going to manifest in 15, 20 years that's some early symptom? I mean, if there's really like large scale studies here, I'm just curious to what kind of things would unravel at the end of that thread. Any thoughts on that?
I know that there's ancient studies about different organs having different effects on us, on our bodies. And then if you look at feet or bottoms of feet in certain different religions, they will tell you which part of the foot basically translates to which part of your organ and how you can detox. And so with the heart, I'm guessing because the heart pumps all of our blood, you're going to have a lot of blood and a lot of stem cells in that area. So especially if you get a heart transplant, especially if there's leftover stem cells in any of the tissues, you're going to get a complete copy that is just clear in a new person from another person. So of course you might take on a lot of things. And that's why they do a lot of studies with stem cells as well, because stem cells are neutral. They're not programmed yet. So each stem cell will basically program itself and tell itself what organ it needs to make in the body. So just the entire process of when a baby is made and then how the stem cells grow from 4 cells, absolutely not programmed. Like they don't know if they're going to be skin cells or hair cells or eye cells or organ cells. They basically have a mechanism within themselves, which means the cells alone have to have memory to know when to activate which cell and how these stem cells will then go and further be either cells for the heart, cells for different types of everything in your body, whether they will even become blood cells. And so it's super interesting that we haven't really studied the beginnings of stem cells and how they work, because I think if we looked into that, we could see how the DNA activates itself in order to tell these cells what to be in the future as the baby is growing inside the woman.
So my brain is it's going a million miles an hour right now, and it just makes me, we always we see it in movies, and we're just like, it's sci-fi of extremities that all of a sudden we can use stem cells and all these things to, somebody can grow an arm, or something, and if we truly understand how, like you said, that selection process of what happens, and then we can isolate, what type of cells built this person's left arm, and can you isolate that so that we can actually build that right arm? I mean, you even got me thinking. So there's this little guy I've been following on X, that got a heart transplant, an infant, and I didn't even realize they did it at that age, that small. And I've been tracking, and it seems like he's doing pretty good. It's been some scary stuff, a lot of prayers for this family, but now knowing about this cell memory, it almost makes me want to reach out to them and be like, hey, find the mom or the dad of the baby that did that transplant, and let them hold Gus's little finger, let Gus hold their finger, and maybe there's just some connection that we just don't understand yet, but that's in that cell memory of that heart that recognizes, the touch of that mom or that dad, that gives it a little bit more strength in the fight. I mean, it just opens the door to so many possibilities that can happen. When TAJANA, when you were looking into this and studying, was there anything that was kind of an obstacle you wanted to get over before you kind of like signed off on, like, all right, I'm buying this? Like, what were some of the, I guess, the hesitations you had with it?
Ooh, so I always keep an open mind. And if a lot of people experience something, I will have an open mind to, there might be a possibility that there is something here. And I think just keeping that possibility open, that's where you start to understand that there's a lot more to life than what we see and what we have been given as information. A lot of people will just kind of that's woo woo. We don't need to look into that. But what people don't understand is the scientist, I can't pronounce his name because it's French, but he isolated the HIV virus, won a Nobel Peace Prize for that, and then started to realize that all of our cells and DNA give off like different vibrations and certain frequencies. And so he wanted to study that, but the government wouldn't give him a grant because it's woo woo. So he actually had to move to China, get a private thing. I mean, he's gone now. He's passed away. But he actually came up with a signature for every single cell giving off different frequencies, and that we can also kill certain bacteria and parasites with frequencies. So we don't actually need medicines and we don't need antibiotics. Some of it can actually be done through frequencies. And so he left his study, like in that sense of the way, he passed away, and then no one's kind of continued that since. And so I find it really interesting that somebody who isolated the HIV virus, was very scientific, very by the book, decides to go, hey, wait a minute, there's a lot more here than what we have been kind of studying and what we know. Might as well look at this woo-woo stuff to see if there's any substantial evidence. And when he did go and search, he realized that there was. But of course, now you're going against big pharma, governments, regulations, and stuff like that, where people lose a lot of money if that kind of information were to come out. And so I always tell people there's so much hidden information out there that you should never disregard it. Even if it does sound woo-woo, you know what? Keep it in a woo-woo kind of section. Be like, I still have some doubts, but those are the doubts that will push you to go and try and find the evidence to actually make it seem true. So with me, I always try and keep an open mind, especially if a lot of people have experienced something that seems out of the ordinary. I'm always like, there's something here to be investigated.
I agree. And big pharma, listen, there's no money in a cure. I think everybody understands that. And I think we've definitely all become, very conscious of where big pharma and the government, the medical industrial complex. This is what I always tell everybody. We always hear these conversations about the military industrial complex and how big it is and how scary it is. And I tell people, and it's true, it is big and it is scary. The medical industrial complex is even bigger.
Yeah, and scarier. And has reach everywhere. You know what I mean? Like the big pharma, I'm pretty sure they make more than big oil. I'm pretty sure they make more than big oil at the end of the day, when it comes to how much money they make. And also they have injured and unalived people with their bad practices that they have not even looked into or tried to remedy, because they have pretty much told themselves that they're, in charge of everything, kind of like gods. And so I think that has gotten to the medical field's heads, where they're no longer scientific. It's basically tyrannical, and they don't really ask any questions beyond what pharma gives them. So it's basically pharma says anything that is outside of pharma's kind of money-making business is all just shoo-shooed away as woo-woo science. And I think that's where we're actually not developing as human beings, is that type of thinking.
And so many more people are becoming open to that thinking now. And so here's a good point to remind people. We know how, if you got pain, it's Tylenol, or ibuprofen and all that. But then we realize, the unfortunate side effects of these things. And I'm not saying, there's some times where an immediate relief needs to be had, and sometimes you got to go to a synthetic thing. But what I am saying is, when you listen to a lot of these holistic doctors, especially, I had a little one that was sick, really, really sick a while ago, to a point where we took her to the ER and then urgent care. I thought she was, maybe it was an appendix issue, my little 3-year-old princess. And they were like, Alpha, just get grapefruit seed extract. Just trust me, And I'm like, yeah, but she's 3. They're like, no, just 3 little drops, and it's good for adults. Just drip it, put in your water, put in your juice or something. And when you're a parent, you're desperate. You'll try about anything. And I was like, well, at worst case scenario, it's something that's just really bitter, right?
Yeah.
Wow. I was like, wow. So I was like, I got to try this. So I did the 10 drops in the water, 8-ounce glass of water. And like I said, it wasn't that I was feeling ill or anything. I was just like curious but I did it in the morning. By evening time, I felt like I did a workout. Like I felt healthy.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's called grapefruit seed extract. If you want to do the work, you could do it yourself. But if not, that you can buy it at like a Sprouts, Trader Joe's or Amazon, and it's little bottle. People are saying it lasts like around 2 years. Just a couple drops here and there.
Oh, wow.
But if we're so open to that, and then we see it works, why wouldn't we be open to something like this? Especially, like you said, you had over 200 people reaching out to you with stories. It is this. I just don't understand why people. What's the word? Cognitive dissonance.
I also think that people don't really trust the natural ways, but they don't understand that what big pharma does is they go out and they search for all of these natural cures, and then they try and change them and make them synthetically and chemically so that they can patent them, because you can't patent anything in nature. It's illegal. So of course they're going to say that, everything natural is woo-woo science or this or that. But how have we made it this far in evolution where we've only had the medical system for the last maybe 100 years, and it's been developing ever since, but it's been also very gatekeeping kind of, I guess, Rockefellers and their whole this is woo woo, that is woo woo, but everything that is made by pharmaceutical companies is basically extracted from nature and then changed slightly synthetically so that it can be patented so that they can make money off of it. And then in law, it also states that they only have a certain amount of years that they're allowed to make money off of patent a product, and then it actually has to be free because it's meant to be, collective knowledge, collectively helping everybody. And so after that, what they do is they change something else in that medicine or chemistry wise so that they can repatent it, and then they will bash their own old things that they can't make money off of anymore, which is exactly what happened with ivermectin, where everybody thought it was a horse paste. But if you look into the history of it in 86, it was actually used for human consumption, and a lot of benefits came out of ivermectin, but the patent ran out and they couldn't make money off of it. So people need to understand how big pharma works and how the law works to realize what big pharma is actually doing and how they are disregarding all of these other things that scientists are basically looking at, saying, hey, we don't have the entire picture, and we need the entire picture, and we need to look into some of these things in order to see if maybe we can make people healthier and better in the long run.
Well, let me ask you this, because I want to go back into the woo-woo. I like being in this place. I use Hollywood again. Vampires, they live forever,
Yes.
right? And what do? They suck the blood, right? The count. How much of this have you looked into it? Could the elites be looking for eternal life in cell memory or reincarnation? Does reincarnation possibly get tied into cell memory?
See, the reincarnation thing is definitely interesting, because once an organ dies, what happens to the cell memory, right? We haven't really studied that. And then even in the Bible, it says that this flesh is just a vessel for our soul, and that the life is in the blood. So I'm wondering, is that why we bleed out animals when we go hunting? And, if you live on a farm, you have to bleed out an animal because they tell you it's unhealthy to actually eat the blood. But then somewhere down the line, someone's like, well, let's make blood sausages. It's like, probably should have read the warning label on the Bible on that one, dudes, But I'm wondering, what happens once a person passes away? Does that cell memory go with them? Is the cell memory part of a physical thing, or is it tied to the soul and the blood? We still don't have enough, I guess, information on that. And it would be super interesting to see if somebody actually were to go down that road to see and kind of test out the theory of what happens when someone passes away.
Now you got me wondering, and you have the brain, so you're the perfect person for me to ask on this one. It's when I hear the word cell, I always think blood, but cells aren't just in the blood. Like plants have cells and things like that. So is it even plausible theoretically that when we're eating our diet, that there's this transcendence of history from the plants, because they say when you get buried, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and so your ashes, your remains kind of going back into the ground. I know we do coffins and all these other things, but it hasn't always been that way, that these memories get caught into the earth, which then becomes part of a plant or a fruit tree, and then the animals eat these things. It's just how far can this cell memory stretch?
That's kind of what I was wondering, because it actually used to be illegal for, I think it was Christians, to burn for a funeral. Like it was actually a natural burial that
Yeah,
was
and
suggested,
I,
right?
I
So
was
that
I was
you're,
raised I was raised Catholic. You're not supposed to be cremated.
yeah, you're not supposed to be cremated. And then there's the Zoroaster religion, which was the first monotheistic religion, which was the first religion to only have one God. And they also have a burial where they put you out in the middle of nowhere and let the animals eat you and let you go back down to the earth, because that's how they say you continue your life. So maybe we've been thinking about reincarnation all wrong. We think that, a soul goes up to the abyss of nowhere and then kind of comes down. But it could also mean that if we were made from dust, like ashes, dust to dust, and then we kind of become living beings, conscious, maybe our continuation is basically back down into the earth, and the reincarnation of having children or being eaten by animals and then being kind of propagated that way, which is super interesting. But with your blood comment about the vampires, there is a conspiracy theory that the rich take the blood of younger children or teenagers, and they clean their blood every 30 days with that, because apparently it holds new, younger information that then can vitalize the rest of the organs.
Well, first let me interrupt you here. We're a full throttle show, so there's no censorship here. So you let it fly, and I know exactly what you're talking about. So
Oh, okay, because I'm like, what am I allowed to say? Which platforms
no,
are you on? I'm trying to use like algorithm
no,
words so you don't get banned.
no, our primary channel is Rumble. So you want to say vaccination, the satanic
Oh,
occultism,
okay.
adrenochrome, let it fly. And with adrenochrome, because it gets tied into what you're talking about. When I was studying that, when I first started getting, my red pill awakening, I came across, for a lot of people don't know this, but we know Google, right? And the software version of Google is Chrome. Well, go, and this is still open source information. You can go to the devil's Google and look this up. The software is called Chrome. Go look up what the chip's called, and I'll save you some time. You could just verify the chip's called Adreno.
Yeah, it's wild.
I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to name the chip Adreno and the software Chrome, knowing that the two work, together. So it's adrenochrome. And the quote unquote conspiracy theories that are out there, it's almost like they're laughing at us.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think they do that because they're sadistic, they're narcissists, right? So of course they want to torment their victims by letting them know that they're tormenting us. But then if we were to say anything, you have their minions basically calling us conspiracy theorists and crazy, and that it's a form of psychological torture because you're getting gaslit on all sides, right? Except I think people are starting to see it because they're getting a little bit more and more brave because their egos are through the roof right now with the whole 2020 and 2021 thing that they were able to do. So right now, I think that the elites are basically going a little power hungry, and this is what's going to cause their downfall because they're being sloppy in every sense of the way, to the point where even normal people who don't believe in these things can't deny it anymore. I mean, there's the few cuckoos who will to the end deny, that we're being screwed over by the government and like these elites. But I think that's what's going to cause them to really, really screw up, is that ego, because they're putting it all out there, all like in our faces, and they're telling us what they're doing and they're telling us what they're going to do. And I don't understand how people can't see it. Like, it's blatant. Even with adrenochrome isn't really blood, it's the plasma. So you have to take the blood and the plasma out because plasma is the one that actually has the adrenaline in it. When they do scare their victim to high heavens and then they siphon the blood, they actually have to centrifuge it to separate the red blood cells from the plasma. So that's why the plasma is usually like a gold color. So when they say golden juice, everyone thought it was peeing, but it's not.
That's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah. So everyone's like, oh, the golden juice. And then they'll say pee. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe you should look into the process of centrifuging blood and plasma and separating it. Because sometimes they do that in labs just to separate the blood from the plasma, because you need to test the plasma instead of the blood or just the blood alone, just to see how many white blood cells versus red blood cells there are. And so if you actually scare a victim enough, that adrenaline will be kept in their blood for at least like an hour or two until like the adrenaline has the ability to fall down and calm the person down again.
That's so interesting because there's a fetish out there, earmuffs for the kids if there's kids watching, uh, but golden showers, and it's this fetish where you get peed on, by one or multiple and whatever. But then it makes me wonder: is the term actually a derivative of what you're talking about, where it actually really had to do with like the golden plasma through some type of ritual or something like that? That's where my brain immediately went when you were talking about that. It's wow.
Yeah. And apparently the adrenaline, once it's oxidized and in the plasma, and then like whoever consumes it, they've even said on camera, like who was it, Zuckerberg? He even said that when he tried it, it was the wildest thing ever. Like apparently it just sends you on a completely like different level of high that can't be really described. And I don't know what they mean by that, like in the level of like euphoria almost. That's what Mark Zuckerberg said when he said he tried this new stuff, and I'm guessing it was adrenochrome. Like I'm kind of guessing right now, so it could have been like something else, could have been like, I don't know, the mushrooms, but I don't think that he would have hid the word mushroom.
Yeah,
And he wouldn't have just said the substance, so yeah, I don't know, it's really wild. Like some of the, but I think the aging thing comes from them just cleaning their blood with regular blood.
And for people that are like, come on, you guys, here's the thing. Go look it up, because they've even tried to create a synthetic version of adrenochrome.
Have they?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
You could go on the internet, especially like back to back, back on the Pizzagate, when it was really hit its pinnacle of trendiness. When people were looking at it, if you went and search, you could actually go and buy it. It was on Amazon. I think I know Amazon took it down for a while. I'd be curious to see if it's made its way back. But you could actually go and buy. You couldn't get it in the U.S. It came from like the Middle East and Asia, but you could get adrenochrome, and it was expensive. And it was like, what the heck,
I'm wondering if it is synthetic or synthetic. If it comes from that part, I'm like, I wonder if it's synthetic.
No, 100%. Because I remember when I was really looking into it, because I took everything that I learned as a detective for investigations and applied it to all these different conspiracy facts, is what I'll call them now. And when you actually looked into it, there was just so many things that were like, all right, this is actually actionable information here that people could look into. Whether it was adrenochrome or these different wireless communications between the body and devices. I mean, let's see if my memory serves me right. It was Whiskey Ocean, so World Order. Yeah, it was, and it was patent. So it's patent WO2020060606. And so essentially, what you had was World Order, and then 2020, and then remove the zeros, and you had 666. And when you look up that, because the patent's still there, who has it? Microsoft. And okay. What is it for? It's for this communication from devices into the body through implants and all that. It's just, it is wild. And I'm telling you that one of the things that just kind of shocked me was when you were talking earlier at the beginning of the show, where you could actually plug in, a device, like a memory card, and program this into the blood. Because there recently, a lot of people, I don't know where your stance is, but a lot of people took this bioweapon injection into their bodies, and there's, why hide the contents of that stuff? And then, we hear about, nanotechnology, we hear about graphene oxide. And of course, what do? I'm like, okay, well, let me go and actually look into this stuff. And there was a website, I don't remember it off heart, but I'll add it in the description. But it was, it was a company, gosh, it was like the Brain something group. But anyways, and I've talked about it before, and I brought it up. But on this website, when you read through, what do they talk about? It's graphene. They talk about graphene oxide. Now, of course, everything's always done with good intentions on the surface. They're talking about using this technology neurologically to help get rid of Alzheimer's and to rebuild that stuff. But in their words, it's on their homepage. They talk about how this provides the ability through the graphene and nanotechnology to reprogram the brain, so to defeat Alzheimer's and things like that. Well, if you can reprogram the brain for that, what else can you reprogram the brain for? And that took me down a whole other thing. This is back when Dr. Artis was talking about, the venom in the water and, all that stuff. But it got me looking into the venom and the peptides of that stuff. And there was a doctor, now crazy thing, he ended up marrying a woman that was like the second or third in charge of the NIH. I'll link all this in the description so people don't just have to take my word for it. I got to go back through my notes. And what he did was he was trying to use nanotechnology and venom peptides to attack certain diseases. Like, you could, at least on the surface, it looked like he meant well. But the problem he had was when he would try to put in this synthetic thing into the body doesn't like synthetic stuff. It would fight it and it would destroy it. So then this is when he came up with the idea of the nanotechnology, or it was a technology, but then he broke it down into a nano size, into 3 different parts. And what he found is when he did it that way, and like I said, I don't know how to explain the science behind it, but once the nano parts got to the organ where they needed to work, the nanotechnology knew how to find itself and now build itself into that structure that couldn't have made it, if it tried to travel the body through the immune system. But now that it was where it needed to be, the nanotechnology would come together, these 3 parts, and you had it. And so it was like, it just sent me down this, oh man, this sounds dangerous to me. And now you incorporate, cell memory, and it's like, I can see the potential to do so much good with it, but I can also see, the journey for, everlasting life, getting us into trouble and what other kind of stuff. And I know we're already over an hour here. So let me ask you this, TAJANA, because I want to get to the last story in video that everybody, if you weren't a believer by now, this story's going to rock your socks. Anything you want to make sure people understand when it comes to cell memory that we haven't covered?
Oh, yeah, actually, we haven't covered. So what they've done with cells as well is they've taken a cell from a human being and put it in a petri dish, kept it alive, and then they would make the person drive certain amount of kilometers away, poked the person with something to see if their cells in a petri dish reacted, and they did.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I'm not even kidding. There's a whole experiment on like cells actually having still memories if you keep them alive. So if the person is like miles and miles and miles away, like I think they did 1,000-mile difference, the cell could still feel what their counterpart where they came from felt, as long as it was kept alive in a petri dish in like a synthetic environment with like temperatures that were perfect for it and all of that stuff. And water also has, I think it was a Japanese scientist. He actually did memory with water, and he would speak very negatively to water, freeze it, and it would be completely jumbled and like a mess. Then he would talk very positively to a cup of water, freeze it, and it would crystallize perfectly in very like straight orders. So when you said that there's actual thoughts with positivity and negativity, huge like cell potential. So those people that say mind over matter, there's people who have been diagnosed with cancer that I know personally who have said, no, I don't have it. And then it just went on living like nothing happened and it went away. And I'm not saying you should do that as a person. Like, I'm definitely not saying you should do that. But like, it takes a special type of stubborn person to be like, no, I don't. And then just walk away from the doctor's office in denial that they don't actually have cancer. And then it ends up being that there's nothing there a few months later.
The power of manifestation or not manifesting it. You're not giving it the opportunity. I completely subscribe to that and believe that 100%. I'll tell you what.
Absolutely.
The petri dish thing, man, did you just set off some red alerts for me? Because if there's that communication, then typically communication works both ways. And what kind of stuff?
Oh yeah.
Could you make people sick? From the opposite way, or hurt people, or affect? It's just one of those things where it's just like, I can picture some evil Pinky in the Brain scientist down at some NK Ultra lab, that doesn't exist in some NSA building, that's doing some weird shit like this. And that's freaky.
Exactly. And also two people that live together or that spend a lot of time together, not just two people, but a lot of people, they will start to kind of sync their vibrations together as well. They've noticed that, like not just
I know all
personalities.
about this because
Yeah.
I'm a dad of daughters.
Okay. So you
And
know.
you know, one thing I realized, you know, a couple of them are adults now, but I remember being in the house you know, when I was a single dad, you know, of girls, and all of a sudden, you know, that time of the month, and they would sync up, and it's like, what the
Yeah.
heck? So I agree. I know for a fact that that happens.
Yep. So it's definitely true that like who you choose to be with, you are what you eat, and you choose who you are with who you surround yourself with. And so I always tell people, be careful with what you do because you do share energy. So like people that go out and have like millions of one night stands, I don't think they understand just how much energy transfer they have given and also have taken from like random weirdos, strangers that they don't even know, right? So it's kind of like what are the implications for that for long term or even psychologically or even for ourselves or emotionally that we don't really study because everyone has that whole culture of do whatever you want in the sense of the way. But yeah, it's super interesting where all of this can lead to and like what rabbit holes it can go down.
100%. So before we get into that heroic, convincing story, I got a tragic one to share, you know, but nonetheless, it's, you know, people can take away from what they will, but it's titled, it's NBC News. A man with suicide victim's heart takes his own life. Now there's some extraordinary circumstances to this case. So I'll just read the first three paragraphs here because they're really short. So man with suicide victim's heart takes his own life. A man who received a heart transplant 12 years ago and later married the donor's widow died the same way the donor did, authorities said, of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The article is dated April 6th of 2008. I'm sorry. And it says, a man who received a heart transplant 12 years ago and later married the donor's widow died the same way the donor did, authorities said, of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. No foul play was suspected in the 69-year-old Sonny Graham's death at his Vidalia, Georgia home, investigators said. He was found Tuesday in a utility building in his backyard with a single gunshot wound to the throat, said Greg Harvey, a special agent with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Now, I know there's different factors here. He took the donor's heart. The donor committed suicide, and then he marries the widow of the donor. So I'm sure there is some psychological and mental stuff going on here. But then at the same time, did that cell memory of, you know, the man that committed suicide stay with it and eventually eat away at this guy? I mean, your thoughts on that, Tajana, and then we'll get into the last one.
You know what? It definitely could because I've heard so many stories of memories coming back from the person before. And if his memories were basically just being tortured in life with his own thoughts and, you know, the difficulties of struggling with mental health and especially depression, it could definitely imprint on cell memory and then transfer over to the person that received his heart. So I can definitely see this, especially because negative energy is so much stronger and more powerful, that sticks around more than love and light, because love and light just transcends and moves, and you know, whereas hate is very centralized and very compact and very powerful. I can definitely see that his cells could have carried all of that depression and torment and then been carried on to the new donor.
Well, when I read that story, the first thing that came to my mind was to bring it back to a biblical instruction. You know, I was raised, you know, we weren't just Catholic. You know, the way Mom said, we're Roman Catholic, right? Very traditional. But one of the things that you were taught in the Catholic Church is, you know, suicide is considered, you know, if I remember the terminology right, one of the venial sins or the unforgivable sin, right? That's personally, I believe God, you know, that's between you and God can forgive anything he wants to. There's a reason he's the creator God. But nonetheless, that this is the cultural religious teaching. And then I'm sure there's other churches that have that. But then it makes me wonder, well, is that rule in place? Was that culturally in place because of cell memory? You know, you do something like that, and then, you know, if these things aren't addressed and issued, all of a sudden those characteristics, that cell memory gets passed on to your kids. And Is suicide something that we do see that there's a link, through generations or through family, genetically, and maybe that's why you're not supposed to do it, because you create this really devastating type of cell memory, that transcends who knows how long. I mean, I don't know. It's just a thought that I had. What do you think about that?
That would actually make sense with the generational curses that the Bible talks about. And a lot of pagan stories talk about generational curses as well. And so that's why they say, you should behave a certain way so that you do not pass on your sins to your kin. And so I can definitely see that. And that would be an interesting thing to actually look at. If look at all the suicide rates and then look at the suicide rates within families, just to see if there is an actual, I guess, pattern in the sense of the way of whether, let's say your father or mother commits suicide, but you're already born. Is there a cell memory that can still remember that? And does it also transcend onto you as a kin and then to your kins as well? Maybe it skips a generation, something that genetics cannot explain. Because a lot of geneticists say, oh, well, this disease skips a generation. And they try and explain it with recessive and dominant genes, but it doesn't really make sense. So this would be a really interesting topic to look at, to kind of secondary see if there is cell memories within all of us who are related. Specifically, if we're closely related, the connection would be much stronger. And so if we've had a suicide in the family, would that transcend from cell memory in the sense of vibrations, not just being given organs back and forth?
Well, you actually reminded me of a question I wanted to ask you, but before I get to that question, here's another thing why I think this really needs to be looked at and researched, because cell memory is real. I'm convinced of it. So out of caution, I would say then, you know what, we shouldn't do organ transplants from people that have committed suicide, until that science is completely exhausted. If even theoretically it's possible, because I know if I needed an organ donation, one thing I'm going to tell the doctor, and I don't know the process of that, but I would tell the doctor, hey, I'm willing to take an organ from anybody, but I don't want an organ from someone who's been vaccinated or someone that committed suicide. Those are my two stipulations.
Yeah, I won't take blood I won't even go to the hospital anymore, because I'm like, they already shooed me out of society, a year ago, and I'm like, I'm totally fine with just not going to the hospital. If I need it, like, just let me go. You know what I
You
mean?
heard
It's
about
my
the Red
time.
Cross? Did you hear about the Red Cross?
No.
So they don't delineate in the blood. So if you go in to get a blood transfusion, or you're someone that needs blood, they don't. There's no separation of this is vaccinated blood, this is unvaccinated blood. Yeah, it was all over the headlines the last few days here in America.
Oh, wow. See, we don't get news anymore in Canada. I have to use like VPN, and I have to go and search for news because Justin Trudeau thinks that we don't need to know what's going on in the rest of the world. So I actually didn't even hear about this. I'm going to have to research this, but that's kind of dangerous in the sense of the way, because I know I heard about the story in Australia where the couple, or was it New Zealand, the couple had a sick child and it needed blood transfusion, and they refused to give a vaccinated blood, and they almost had their child taken away from them for that basic choice.
That's wild. And you touched on something else with that VPN. I got to see where it's at. I think it might have failed, or it's going to fail, but they were trying to pass some type of law here in America to the use of VPNs and stuff like that to be unlawful, like criminal.
What? Well, no way.
Yeah, I gotta look into it. Somebody in the chat can drop a link to it if they find it. Here's the other thing. If you're watching the show live, or if you watch it over the next few weeks, if you have a story of an organ transplant where what me and TAJANA have been talking about, and you want to share it, reach out to me, and I'll get with TAJANA. Maybe we can do another show and bring you on, or maybe a few people on to share these stories and dive into it again. But the question that you reminded me of, TAJANA, I hear these stories, people get a heart transplant, everything we've been talking about, and you talked about in a different matter, but dominance. My question is, does that mean that the organ that comes in becomes more dominant than, I'll just call it, the host body, and that's why this happens?
See, that's the interesting part, is it's almost dependent on the person, because some people have gotten like blood transfusions and organ donations, and they didn't notice any difference. And so I think we need to study, one, what the blood type is of the, like, I know the blood types have to match, of course. Like, it has to, you can't just, transfer any organ from anyone. It has to be a matching blood donor, or otherwise, like, your own immune system will basically reject it. But I'm wondering if there is something within the donors and the recipients that we can study all across the board, of the ones who did experience a change in their personality versus the ones that didn't experience anything, and then look at it from a genetic standpoint of view to see if there is something dominating, or if there's a recessive agent that actually plays into cell memory and how it is expressed in the recipient or the new person.
I'm so freaking curious.
I'm gonna go down that rabbit hole now for 8 hours. Watch me like get
There-
off this show, and then it's gonna be like I'm not gonna like even look up.
there was a guy, and he was coming on X, pretty frequently. I'm trying to remember his name, but his whole expertise was on blood types, and he was talking about how it's blood types is way more important than anybody wants to understand. And he was talking about down to not just your diet, but your personality, to what your strengths are, to like what kind of work and stuff that you should be doing. Like it was just crazy, the understanding that he had of it. And I wanted to learn, because I'm O positive, 'cause in the military we all know our blood types,
Yeah.
and it was.
I'm AB positive. I didn't realize how small of a I guess thing was until I did my video. I thought I was I figured I'm positive. I'm like, I gotta be like the general pool of like the most, but apparently I'm AB positive. And then I started looking into where all of our blood types came from and all of this stuff. And I found a guy on the internet, on TikTok, actually. Can't find the video again, but he basically said that AB individuals are a hybrid form, and that we're like the newest addition into the thing. So I all immediately got scared. I'm like, wait, am I a reptilian? What? Like, what is going on here? So then I went down this entire rabbit hole. I'm like, am I a hybrid human being? Right. And so I couldn't find anything on that, but I'm definitely going to go and look into the different blood types and personalities and diets. And, they also know how to predict certain health risks with different blood types as well, which I think is super interesting. So that's kind of cool.
It's very cool, and like I said, he went into that, consistencies and certain types of ailments, why some cures work for some people but don't work for other people. And he's just like, everybody's looking into DNA and all that, it's blood type. He's like, you gotta focus on blood type. Real quick, Tiana, I'm gonna play that clip. It's a few minutes, you guys. If everything we've talked about the last hour and 23 minutes hasn't convinced you, then wait do you listen to this story right here. And for the record, and I told this to Tajana before the show started, I was like, I gotta be able to prove that this story is legit. And so I was researching. I actually found a medical journal that talks about it. I'll link that down in the description. Just for those that are new to the show, the description is kind of laid out. You guys will see it's a summary of the show. I have sponsors, where to find my guest, in this case Tajana. About midway, 2/3 of the way down, there's a thing that's called links to the show, things that we brought up on here, or the videos. All the links are there. So if you want to share them, if you want to watch them again, receipts, all that stuff's right there. So you guys can go find it. So let me bring this up on, and then afterwards, we'll close out with final thoughts, and you can let everybody know where to find you. So let me bring this up on the screen and hit play.
The following story will indicate that indeed it does. Now I'm going to warn you. This story may leave you skeptical, because it did the same for me when I first heard about it, until I had the opportunity to verify its validity. This case was researched and documented by Dr. Purcell from the University of Vienna, which is an authority in cellular memory transfer. It was also researched and documented by Professor Dr. Gary Schwartz. This is the incredible story of an 8-year-old girl from a small town in the Midwest who received the heart of a 10-year-old girl. The transplant was successful, but almost immediately the little girl began to have a recurring dream, more like night terrors. And the nightmares were frequent enough that it concerned her parents. They brought her to her doctor, and he recognized that it was out of the realm of his expertise and recommended that she sees a psychiatrist. When the little girl had the opportunity to tell the psychiatrist what she sees in the dream, he tells the parents that this is not a typical dream, but it has all the characteristics of a memory. The question is, whose memory was this little girl having night after night? A forensic artist was called, and the little girl began recounting her dream, how alone, running through the woods late at night, she was assaulted by a man who, at the moment of killing her, whispers some words to her. Based on the little girl's details, the forensic artist drew a sketch that was later circulated by the authorities. Shortly after, the authorities found a man matching the description. When the man was brought in for questioning, he quickly broke down, admitting to the killing of the 10-year-old girl. But here is the freaky part. When questioned about the details, the man recounted to the police the very words that the little girl had told police prior that were revealed to her in her dream. Based on that evidence, the man was convicted, sentenced, and is serving time in prison for the murder of the little girl. Now, this case was solved only because the memories of the little girl were preserved in the cells of her heart that were now in the body of the new recipient. When I first heard of the story, I was at a conference on how to bridge science with spirituality, and the speaker, Greg Braden, used it to illustrate how powerful our hearts are and how they have an intelligence of their own. This was also confirmed by astonishing discovery by a group of scientists led by Dr. Andrew R. Moore in Montreal, Canada, that shook the skeptic scientific community, forcing them to finally re-examine the way they thought about the heart and the possibility of cellular memory transfer. In 1991, Dr. Moore discovered that the heart had an intrinsic nervous system of its own, with a concentration of 40,000 specialized cells called sensory neurites. Now, what's so important about these cells, you may be wondering? Well, these cells are identical to the cells found in our brain, but they are in our hearts. And these cells learn, think, feel, and behave completely independent than our brain.
And I will stop that there, because now everybody knows there's a rhyme and a reason. Why did I play that first video earlier? Because that's when everybody was willing to accept the science behind how our brain recalls these memories. You guys remember Morgan Freeman voice example? And now we close with this video, which has a spectacular story that I would love to get your thoughts on, Tajana. But we learned that these doctors discover that same stuff that was here for the Morgan Freeman voice, it's right here. How special is that? Tajana, your thoughts on that, and then give us your closing thoughts as well, and where can people find you?
That's actually really interesting. I didn't know about the similar cells that are found in brains and hearts, because they usually tell you to, like, you can think with your heart or you can think with your brain, right? And so there's actually some truth in that saying. So I'm definitely going down that rabbit hole for sure right after we get off of this. But yeah, everyone can find me at TruthSeeker01011 on any social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and X. I was on Rumble, but I forgot to post on there, and YouTube, and I keep forgetting to post on there because time is limited.
Well, I'll tell you what, and I'll get your final thoughts right here, Tajana. You need to be putting those. I know how much that I've gained just from watching the stuff you're putting on X. You have so much information and such a good energy and spirit about you. You really should get back on Rumble and put it out there. It'd be a benefit to the rest of the world. But please, your final thoughts on our conversation that we've had tonight. And then, is there anything you're working on that people will find when they come to your page?
Ooh, I've actually learned so much more in this subject, because I was kind of fresh in the rabbit hole of cell memory. And so I was still trying to like learn a lot more, but now you've opened up so many doors that I can kind of go through. And our conversation with bouncing ideas back and forth was amazing. So I'm definitely going to be looking more into that. And I think remote viewing is my next thing. It's the ability for people, and I'm wondering now if they have a special type of blood lineage or something that allows them to remote view, because they're remote viewing the other side and NED, so near-death experiences. And I'm kind of curious to see what I find when I go down that rabbit hole, because this whole reincarnation, cell memory, you know, why are we here? How long are we here for? What is our purpose? All of that absolutely fascinates me and interests me to like the nth degree.
Well, I can pretty much promise the audience I will definitely be bringing TAJANA back, and we're going to have quite a few conversations. You guys, I know you want more of her. The links to follow her are down in the description. Don't go away yet. You guys know I do a new thing on the show, X Spaces Profile Spotlight. And tonight you get to see who's the spotlight for tonight. Also, remember, Alpha Warrior Show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Go back if you're a new person. Thank you for joining us. If you're a new monthly subscriber, thank you for keeping the lights on and food in Alpha's fridge for the family. I appreciate that, you guys. So now it's time for the X's Profile Spotlight, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow night. Told you guys were going to be wild with that. So tonight's X's Spaces Profile Spotlight might catch you guys by surprise. Let me bring it up on the screen and I'll explain why. So the spotlight goes tonight to Kimberly K. Scott. And why I say you guys might be surprised is politically and with some ideologies, I don't align, and me and Kimberly don't align on these things. You know, she's from a different political spectrum than I am. But with that said, I've found, you know, in her spaces to be very healthy for dialogue. As a matter of fact, we've had these conversations in private about we need to get out of the echo chambers that we have. And let me change the style of this a little bit right there, make it a little bit bigger. And even though we don't agree politically, we don't always want to be in echo chambers. We don't always want to be in spaces or these virtual town halls with just people that agree with us. We want to hear the different sides of these coins. We want to hear what the other side thinks about. And a Rumble rant coming in from Vegas Deplorable 26, $5. Thank you. When my MRAP was blown up by a 200-pound IED in Afghanistan, I never told my family until I got home months later. My father said on the call he dreamt the same situation. I didn't tell him until later. I'd like to get some more information on that story, Vegas. Shoot me a DM if you follow me on X. If not, shoot me an email to the show email. But bringing it back here to Kimberly, is she has just the finesse of bringing people that think differently, believe differently, work differently, and bring them together to have these conversations. And she's had some other co-hosts with her that are good people, but that's not all she does, is just spaces. You know, she does some other things. So let me just let her explain that for herself in this video that she had. And I think you guys will enjoy this. So take a listen. It's just under a minute. And actually, there's one other video of hers that I want to show, but let's give it up for this one.
I've lived with this disease since I was 12. At times, it was almost my identity. I desperately wanted to believe that my fight had a reason, and I learned by helping others, I heal myself. I start each day with prayer and meditation, asking, seeking for those people to help. There's this moment when someone says, "You changed my life," that I know I was sent here to turn my pain into purpose. People always tell me that Lyme disease is going to limit my ability to chase my dreams, but I've never been good at doing what I'm told. Along this journey, I let broken become beautiful and help others do the same. So I say, embrace the struggle. Don't let your limitations define you. Your wounds can become wisdom, and you can rewrite your own story, one miracle at a time. I've lived with this.
And so, as you got a little taste there in just under a minute, is there some things that you probably align with? So, yes, you guys, I know the vast majority that probably watch my show, subscribe to my show, we probably have, the same political beliefs, or at least similar. But you heard something there from someone that's on the other side of, like I said, the political spectrum that still has some foundational principles that I believe in. She's made some statements that I find absolutely real, and I would put the faith in them. And so I highlight her ex profile tonight to remind not just myself and you guys that it's not always people that think like us and talk like us that we need to be around. We don't want to just be a cookie cutter society. We want diversity in our society, not the way the elite cabal may project that, but the way we see it. So let me go to one more video. And for those that are curious, the links to follow her will be down in the description under the tab that says X Spotlight. Right now it's blank because I always try to keep it a surprise. Not even the people I pick know that I'm picking them until the show has reached this point. But shortly after, when I do the editing, it'll be there in about 30 or 40 minutes. But those that are impatient like myself and want to follow her on X, her handle is at Dear Kimberly K, and that's Kimberly KIMBERLY, and then KKAY. One of the other things that she does is a community, and I'm going to have to pull this one off the screen so I can bring up the other one, and I'll play. So bear with me just 1 second, you guys, as I bring this one on. And this one explains what the other thing that she's working on in her community, if you want to be a part of it, because she actually teaches people about these spaces and other things. So let me just bring it on the screen, and I'll let her speak for herself. Take a listen to this. This is about 2 minutes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Scott, and I am the creator, the founder, whatever you want to call it, here at the Creator Classroom on Twitter. I'm better known on Twitter also as Dear Kimberly K. You can find me in the search bar or just by clicking my avatar, I believe, to the left of this video. I wanted to just hop in and make you all aware of some changes that we're making, as we are going to be a more post-friendly community. The Creator Classroom is a place of all creators of all types to come together and to collaborate, connect, continue our education. So please take a moment to check out the rules so you know what you're posting and how you're engaging, as there is no soliciting, no posting of controversial comments or anything like that, other than like, what platform do you use, or what's your favorite editing, that sort of thing. That's allowed. Going forward, we will be opening up the timeline to be more post-friendly. The allowed post should be teaching oriented for creators using video, YouTube links, Twitter Spaces, podcast, quotes, book recommendations, or anything else creator topic oriented. We will also be including content from our featured teachers, which are people that we have loved learning from. They share little tidbits, tips, techniques, different things that they have in their back pocket that maybe they've used over the years that we really could benefit from. And we also will be holding weekly Twitter Spaces for the community called the Creator Classroom. And my co-host and co-moderator and co-founder of the Creator Classroom, Hosleen Mane, whom I'm sure you've seen around Twitter Spaces, and if you haven't, you will. We will be hosting that Twitter Space every week called the Creator Classroom, and you'll be able to find that at mostly every time, every week, but we will shift. We'll be doing interviews with CEOs, founders of different platforms, and also featuring our very own content creators here in this community as well. On those spaces, we also teach. So we would love for you to stop by. And then lastly, just thank you in advance for being respectful, being a part, contributing, and I'm sure we'll see you on the timeline or in a Twitter space very soon.
So there you guys have it. Absolute proof that people that don't line with us politically are not all crazy. And the same is true for them. And I've had the opportunity to have a voice in some of Kimberly's spaces where people got to hear people from, the Republican side, conservative side, MAGA side are not all crazy as well as they've been told. So you guys, tonight's X's Spaces profile goes to Kimberly K. Scott. Go give her a follow. Let her know Alpha sent you. And if you guys, let me pull this off the screen. If you guys have an account, these are the best voices you've never heard. If you follow or if you've heard of someone on X, formerly Twitter, that has a great voice, they have great information, they're brilliant, but for whatever reason, they just haven't had the support behind them. The algorithms haven't gone behind them. DM me or email me. I'm going to be getting other, larger voices that we bring the spotlight to. But right now, I really want to focus on the best voices you've never heard, because there's so many people that the world needs to hear from. And I'm just going to do my part to help facilitate that. So with that, you guys, we run the show commercial free. So make sure you stay tuned for these last, 90 seconds to 2 minutes to support my sponsors, because they support me. YouTube is up and running. two live shows, no strikes, nothing like that. So, Rumble's always going to be the primary platform until Criado comes along. But if you guys can do me a solid, go over to YouTube. The link's down in the description, and just give it a subscription and a follow to kind of help me with the algorithms on there to try to reach another audience, because this is what it's about. Finding people and bringing people the truth on information they never heard from. I hope tonight's show really entertained you guys. If you guys want to follow Tajana, her links are also down in the description. It's been a great night. Gladio Part 5 tomorrow with the Colonel, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Keep me in your prayers. Again, like I said, court for my legal battle is coming up on Thursday. And with that, you guys, I will catch you guys tomorrow. God bless. Semper Fi.
My Towels solved the problem that we've all had with towels. You go into the stores and they feel lotiony and soft, but then you get them home and they wind dry you. That's why I made My Towels. They actually work, they're soft, and they absorb. And now I'm excited to announce 2 brand new lines of My Towels. What makes them the best towels ever is they're now made with 100% long staple Shapir cotton. This is a combed ring spun cotton that makes My Towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory sale price as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get My Towels for only $29.98. Or you can get my designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save 50% now on all My Towels. They actually work. What a concept. This offer won't last long, so please order now.
mypillow.com.
Are you worried about the effects that higher inflation rates will have on your investments? Are you trying to secure your retirement savings against losses, but you notice that inflation is a hot topic these days? But how dangerous are low inflation rates on your retirement savings? An inflation rate of 2% may not seem like much, but it means that prices will just about quintuple over the lifetime of the average American. And 4% average inflation rate means that something that costs $1 when they're born will cost $23 when they die. That demonstrates the danger of even low inflation rates. So when it comes to gold and inflation rates, many investors want to know whether inflation rates have an effect on gold prices. What history indicates is that over the long term, increased inflation should lead to correspondingly higher gold prices. From September 1971 to August 2020, gold grew 7.5 times as much as inflation. Not only can an investment in physical gold help protect your assets against the damage done by inflation, it can also help grow the value of your retirement portfolio over the long term. If you're looking to protect your retirement assets, why wait until stock markets crash and gold begins to rise in price?